Get that. Okay, so this week we talked about chapter 7, and I think one chapter a week, we're just gonna have to deal with that. And if we don't get as far as I thought, then that's okay. Because more than one chapter a week, I think is gonna start killing people, and I don't want to kill people. Um, so let's let Barbara or Barbie get in here.
I thought this week's was harder than last week's.
Yeah, it's conceptually harder. Although I assume you probably did arrays in Python, right?
Yeah.
So the concept is similar. So just to do a kind of an overview, and then we'll deal with some questions. Somebody that can't be here had a question about the first homework problem. I think Cam had a question. So I'll go ahead and talk about that one after I answer your questions. Remind me, somebody, because I will forget 100%. But this is kind of a mixed bag chapter too. We have the array stuff. It all deals with arrays, but it's a little bit weird. So an array is it's a data structure. The first one we really talked about. All those strings are kind of data structures too, but it's just a way we can store homogeneous data. So it's data that's the same type. You can't have a mixed array of integers and strings. Okay, there are other data structures that do allow mixing, but this is not one of them. Okay, so it turns out to be a fairly convenient way, and every language that I've ever dealt with has arrays, and it's a big part of the language. You know, it's if you're doing grades for a class, rather than having to have a variable for each student's test score, you have an array of test scores, and it just adds a whole lot of power and flexibility to your programming. So they're really good things. They're really important. It's one of the more important things we've covered so far. Okay. So I put out another video this afternoon, if you guys saw that. Although it doesn't do, well, look at that, and I still don't know why. It doesn't do what the book says it does as far as not making changes. So we'll see what I did. Maybe I did something wrong. Anyway, so with the arrays, you have to declare the array. You have to either you have to give it a size, either explicitly give it a size or put the array members in curly brackets. Okay. So that's the first thing the book talks about. Regular arrays talks about multi-dimensional arrays. They just do two-dimensional arrays. You can certainly do 3 if you wanted. You can do, I don't think there's a real limit to that. I've probably told you before that I once, as a young programmer, solved a problem that was thousands and thousands of lines of code down to about 200 lines by implementing a 9-dimensional array. And it was a disaster. I mean, I had to sit and meditate in a room quietly to be able to get all those pieces together. I took it to my boss, and she's like, "This is crap. You got to redo it." And I thought, well, she's an idiot. Well, it turns out she was an idiot, but in that case, she was absolutely right. Nobody can do. If you go past 3 dimensions, you're in sci-fi world, and it's gonna be hard. But anyway, it's the same idea. So a 2-dimensional array is an array of arrays. So you can have remember, an array just has to be homogeneous. I'm getting excited. Let me calm down. I get excited and I talk too fast. I'll try to slow it down. I listen to myself on tape, and I'm like, you need to slow down. I like arrays, so I get excited. Anyway, so an array is a homogeneous data structure. It can include other arrays. So you can have arrays of arrays and arrays of arrays of arrays to get 3 dimensions and so forth. Okay. Then it also talks about the idea that we can have functions that have indeterminate number of parameters, which is weird. And that's what the first homework problem is about. So if you're, and because what we normally have to do, and we're talking about this a little bit more next chapter, so it's odd we put it in here. We can have what we call overload methods. So you can have a function called average that takes 2 parameters, and one that takes 3 parameters, and one that takes 4 parameters, whatever you want. Okay. So what you could also do with this chapter is, if you put in the ... and I'll show you an example here in a minute, there's one in the book, then it allows you to send as many as you want. Well, there's no real mechanism for doing that once you get to the function. So it just puts it in an array, which makes perfect sense. So if you have an array function and you have the ... and you give it 4, it puts those 4 in an array, sends the array to the function. If you give it 20, it does the same thing. Okay, so you can do with it like normal. Okay, it talks about the command line stuff in there, and the command line is also whatever you type in. We're not really doing command line in this class. That would be if you typed in Java at the command line and then the name of your program. Okay, so we're not really doing that. So I told you not to worry too much about that, but it's the same idea. When you type in the program name and list some parameters, those come into the program as an array. and that's the args. If you wonder why it's public static void main string args, the string args is an array, a string array that gets sent in from the command line. Okay, but we're not really doing that. I assume Eclipse allows you to do command line, but it's not important enough for us to mess with, so I wouldn't worry about that. Okay. And then also the stuff at the end is on the class array, which has some nice methods built in. And there's that. It's where you don't create your own arrays. You call upon, you import the array class, and you can do sorting and averaging and all that stuff. Okay, which can be useful as well. So a few more people have arrived, which is good. So what questions do you guys have? And remind me to talk about problem one if we don't get there. No one has questions.
That first one didn't need to print an array though, right? We were supposed to give it some arguments for it to calculate.
Yeah, and I think I'm glad we're talking about the first one. Someone did have a question. I think they probably had a question because it's just so vague, right? So let's see, write an application that calculates the product of a series. Oh, no, it tells us. I thought it said make something up. So you're going to give it numbers and it's going to multiply them all together, right? That's all it's going to do. Test your method with several calls, each with a different number of arguments. I would have it print out once it comes back from the function, just so you can test it, right? So in general, you don't print inside of methods. And I will say function and method interchangeably because they're the same thing, but they're not different. So Java tends to call them methods. So in a method, you can print, but you usually don't want to. Okay, so in the case of this, where you're going to calculate the product, you want to send that back to the main function, the main method, where you then print it out. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. That's really, those are simpler than you would imagine, which is good. Okay, and that's
I took that one as being kind of like the one that had the sums. Like I did it in the same way as the example in the book that had the sums. I can't remember exactly what it did now, but I did it almost exactly the same way as that one.
Well, how I read this, and instead of I'll call this.
Oh yeah, the average one. That's what it was. Sorry.
Yeah, it should look very much like this, right?
But it's just like that one.
So that's going to be an int there. It's going to be an int over here. Okay, and what I'm doing here is what I would do there, where I would just let's call it p is equal to 0. Then I'm going to go through. The book doesn't do this. The book does that weird 4 variable colon. I think that's confusing, and I don't like it, so I just do it the old school way. So I'm going for int c equals 0. If you do it the other way, you're fine. C is less than numbers.length, C++, and then here I'm just going to let p be equal to. I'm going to find my home keys. P times the next number. Okay, and then you're just going to return. You don't care about the average. You're just going to return that p.
Except you have to initialize it as 1 instead, since it's multiplying.
You do, and you also have to make it an int. Yep, you're correct on both counts. Okay, and then this has to be a product here. Okay, so, and that should be an int. This is how I would do that one. And I would print out something a little more exciting than just the number, but you know, that's the basic idea. But rather than printing down here, you may not want to have the same message all the time. So it's always better to just return the value, and then you can, do what you want with it. So I could put this into a printf with a lot more stuff. Okay, so I could do a printf. The sum, or the product, sorry, product of the numbers is %d, %n, like that. What doesn't it like? Oh, I'm missing a parentheses. I thought parentheses, typed in that. Yeah, it should be okay. So, I mean, you could certainly do something like that. That looks a little better. But again, you could also, and it doesn't say that, you can make it fancier if you want. You can ask the user for numbers. You could put a little loop in there, keeps asking them until they hit a negative 99 or whatever, if you wanted to, but you don't have to. This will get the job done. Okay.
I think it also said something about how you had to run it with different different numbers.
Oh, yeah. It does. You're right.
Of things too.
So yeah. So I would just.
I did like 3 different print statements to be able to do that.
You do it right in a print statement too. You don't need a variable. You're correct.
But I had put mine in, like how you have the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I had put in like 5 different numbers and called them like P1, P2, P3. Like I did them like that.
Yeah, you can. That's fine. I'm lazy. Okay. But yeah, you can always call it correct from in there. And that makes it easier if you want to just do several of them with different numbers. You could go ahead and and that should, yeah, so that seems, whoa, that does not seem reasonable. What are any of those doing? No, why? Oh, maybe it is.
Yeah, that looks right.
First and the third one are definitely right. The second one,
5,000. I guess there's a lot of more numbers there. That's why. It's multiplication, not division. So I guess it does make sense. Yeah, a lot of times. So if I were going to turn this in, I would verify those numbers, right? Students often, they'll turn in something like this, and what's the product of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? It's 4 million. Well, no, it's not. So you have to know. You can't rely on your program to tell you if it's right or not, right? You have to do it either in Excel or in your head or on paper or in a calculator or something. That just makes sense. Okay. So yeah, I not only gave some helpful tips, I gave you the whole program on this one. So everybody should get this. But yeah, that was a little bit of a weird one. Other questions about this? How we did it? Why I did it the way I did it? Okay, the other one I had worked on was just some general stuff with arrays. And we'll get to the issue that I'm having, and I'll read the book again. I read it 6 times today. It's just not making any sense to me. But remember, when we're declaring arrays, you either have to do something like this. Okay, where array 1's the name of the array. I'm using the new keyword. I could do that in 2 lines if you want. You can say array bracket bracket array 1, and then array 1 is equal to new int, but I don't see a point in doing that. So just do it on 1 line. So you have the array 1 is equal to new int 5, which again, what's going on behind the scenes with arrays? Arrays are stored in contiguous memory. So we don't really get, in C++, you can deal with memory directly. You can't really in Java, but just know that there's a room full of boxes of memory locations. And we've now got 5 in a row that the program has reserved and called array 1. Okay. So, and then this just, the tests are open book, open notes. You should have easy access to where you can loop through an array without having to go searching through the book. Okay. So I always do it the same way. I usually use int c for counter. You can use whatever you want. I don't recommend mixing them up because why? The less you have to think about, the better. If I'm going to do a for loop, it's int c equals 0 or 1 or whatever every time I program, no matter the language. It's less overhead for me, so I can focus on other issues. Okay. Remember that every object in Java knows its length. It seems like, and maybe somebody will remember, it seems like in Python, length is a function. Is that right? Is there a len bracket bracket? Does anybody remember? So I always want to do that, but it's not. It's a member data of an object, just the length. So I'm going from 0 again up to, but not including the length. If the length is 10, remember the numbers go from 0 to 9. Okay. And then C++ to go around. And then I'm just asking the user in this case to enter an integer, and then I'm putting that position. So the first will be a 0 and then so forth to get the integers in there. Okay. So there'll be, how many will there be? There'll be 5 here. Could I just put 5 here? I could, but then if I changed it, it wouldn't be correct, right? So it's really better to use the length function. So whatever that length is, we're going to be okay. Okay. And the other way, now I'm just printing. So the print's the same thing, the same exact loop. In fact, I cut and paste that loop because it's the same. And then I'm printing out the array1 sub C. That's going to print things out. Okay. And then this other way to do it, again, is we can directly load all the members of the array like this. So I can say, and again, the two brackets let the system know it's an array. Okay. So int, two square brackets, int square brackets, array2 now is equal to the curly braces, and I'm just putting in 1 through 8. Okay. Then same thing, I'm going to print out that array down here. I'm not asking the user. Okay. I also wanted to talk about, this is where I got into trouble, which is interesting, that I created a function down here, and this can be either above or below where the main is. Yeah, Virgil?
When you have a multi-dimensional array, does that length work?
The length, well, there's two things. There's the length, let's say your array is A. There's the length of A, which is how many rows there are. There's a length of A empty brackets, which is how many columns you have.
So you could say, so like for a nested loop, you would say for I equals up to array or A dot length.
Yes.
And then for J equals up to a bracket dot length.
Yes, because it's the length of how many arrays you have, and then it's the length of what each array is.
Okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't see everybody. I happen to see Virgil. So if you have a question, just to speak is better. I could see you, but there's somebody down the bottom that I can't see. So a raised hand doesn't always work when I'm sharing my screen. Yeah, so on this array, when you want to send an array to a method, okay, and the method, C++, this method would have to be before the main. Here, it doesn't matter. It's going to take care of all that for us, okay? So I just have to put the brackets again. So whatever gets sent from the main program, or wherever it's sent from, it doesn't have to be main, whatever it's called there, so I'm calling it up here on array2. Then that array, which is this array, so these positions are the values, supposed to be, the values that are in these boxes that are somewhere in the memory room, okay, are going to be sent to the double array function, okay? So A is equal to array2 because of the way I called it, okay? So once it's there, I'm going to go through and make changes to that, okay? So I'm just going to go through a print, and I could do this in one step. You know, I could just print it out, print out the double, but I decided to show you if I wanted to modify the array, I'm letting each member of the array equal to 2 times that, that whatever was there, and I'm printing out those doubles, okay? The problem is, let me find it in the book, make sure I'm not losing my mind. And this is me not programming in Java tons, is that when you're, this is section 7.9 on page 279 in my book at least, when you're passing something to a function, to a method, you can either pass by reference, which gives, you're sending the box numbers in the memory room of the array. So any changes made are live and will reflect back, we call it side effects, back in the main program. Or there's pass by value. Pass by value doesn't send where the 1 through 8 are located. It just sends that it's 1 through 8. So it's the values of them. If you pass by value, then you can't have any side effects, at least supposedly not, okay? So in C++ and in Python too, you have an option which way you want to do it, either pass by reference. That's not true. In Python uses a pass by object, which is just weird all the way around. But in C++, you can choose whether to pass in a live memory address that makes changes back in main or not, okay? So it explains all of that in this section. And then it says, Java does not allow you to choose pass by value or pass by reference. And then in italics, all arguments are passed by value. So objects themselves cannot be passed to methods. When a method modifies a primitive data type parameter, now that's an interesting thing. Yeah, it's still, It has no, it says right here, it gives an example in the book where it doesn't have any effect on the array. So we're going to run this and you'll see what I'm seeing. And I don't know the answer because this A, because we're passing by value always in Java, is not array 2. So when I come back after I've done this and printed out the double, what I print here should be the original array, not the double. That's not what I did earlier. Let's see. Enter 5 of these. Yeah, see, that's not right. I don't know why it's doing that. I'm going to have to do some more research. That directly contradicts what the book says. I don't know. Don't know what to tell you.
Well, why is the answer more than 5 numbers?
Oh, well, there's 2 things going on here.
I see array 2 up there. Okay, yeah. I see. Never mind.
And yeah, I need a better print because these are the 5 numbers.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
And I need something else in there. And then here's the array 2, and that's all looking good. And then here is the doubled, which is great. But then when I do array 2 again down here, the book says it's not going to change it. But as you can see, it changed it. And I don't have an answer. I will try to find an answer for that. It doesn't make any sense. I'm not returning anything from there. I think I said in the video, it may be a version issue, so I'm not really sure what to do with that. But that's kind of an overview of what we do with arrays, okay? So what are the questions?
This is not about an array, really. Line 39, the C++, the counter operator?
It just increment. Yeah, it makes it one more. And if you don't like that, you can say C is equal to C plus 1. Works just the same.
Right. I knew that I don't know if that's in chapter 2. It's been a while, but
I think it is too. Yeah.
I remember you saying that we could use.
You can also do a plus plus C, but in this case, it doesn't make any difference. It's whether it uses it and then increments or increments and then using it. But yeah, you can always do it this way.
What is the difference between the plus plus at the beginning and the plus plus at the end?
It has to do in some circumstances, like in a calculation, does it do the calculation and then increment? That's C++, or does it increment and then do the calculation? That's plus plus C. Practically speaking, you don't tend to, it's not usually a big deal. But in some cases it could be. I just do C++ and it always works in this case.
Okay, because I saw it both ways in the book. Yep. And I was like, no, which one means what?
Yeah, the plus plus is more common. I think only if there's, I mean, because it doesn't make a lot of sense to use it and then implement and then increment it on the way out. So that would be a kind of a weird situation, I think. So typically you wouldn't do it that way. You do it like this. Okay. And there's a minus minus as well and a plus plus as well. Or sorry, minus minus C and C minus minus as well, if you're going backwards. So what other questions do you have about arrays or any of the homework problems or any of that stuff?
Reading that paragraph you were talking about, like the second half of the paragraph is talking about like if you had sent a specific value from the array to the function, it wouldn't get changed.
Right.
Which, I mean, taking that in light of the whole paragraph, it sounds like sending one array element is by value, but sending the whole array maybe is by reference.
Oh, it could be. I mean, that makes sense. But you know, it's not clear there.
Yeah, it's definitely not clear the way they have it worded. But I mean, from what I remember of like C and C++, if you were sending an array, all it's really sending is a pointer to the first element, right?
Yeah, but in performance tip 1, it says passing references to arrays instead of the array objects themselves makes sense for performance reasons because Java arguments are passed by value. If array objects were passed, a copy of each element would be passed. But I did that and it still made a change. I'm guessing it's a version issue. It's if not, what the book says for performance makes sense. If you're passing something big to a function, like it could be a very large array, you don't want to have to make a copy of it in memory. That could be a lot of memory. So it makes sense it would be by reference, but just the book didn't say that, so it confused me.
Yeah. Yeah,
But this is clearly sending it by reference. Which means if you want to preserve the original, you would have to make a copy of it once you got inside of the function, which is just weird. So yeah, I'm not sure. I'm gonna do a little more reading on that. I didn't have time much of the video to do that. What other questions do we have about arrays or anything?
Well, the one that I was having trouble with was number 20.
Okay.
And I was having trouble getting it to format the way that I wanted it to.
Okay.
And I probably spent way too much time working on that one, but but I got almost everything formatted how I wanted it, because I wanted it to tab between each one, because I was trying to line them up.
The column format, right.
And I was also giving them headings for the columns.
Uh-huh.
And I wanted it lined up with that.
Right.
And so I got all of that lined up, except for my last line, where I was trying to give the product totals. So like how many in total were sold.
Right.
I couldn't get that to line up right.
Well, one thing, instead of using, I tend to use tabs because that's what C++ does, which I'm programming a bunch more. But this chapter, without explaining it, it seems, maybe I just missed it in reading it, talks about how you can give a number of spaces, basically. So if
Yeah,
you
I don't like that though.
well, I don't either, but it does
I
work.
was doing tabs and I couldn't get
Me
it.
too. But if
Yeah.
you do like a %20, it's going to give that column 20 all the time. And
Mhm.
that's going to work better, even though I don't like it.
So
I'm with you about
yeah, the problem I was having was I was trying to get it. So mine is doing like, I added a row type, or like a title for my row. And then where I was adding my last row with the product totals, it's not going in one line. It's doing like the next line and is over on the left.
I wonder, I mean, tabs are weird also, that tabs are predefined. Sometimes you need one, sometimes you need two. If it's your last line, it may be a little bit too big. It's bleeding over the number of tabs. And that may be what's jumping that last line.
I don't know. Do you want to see what it looks like?
Sure, let me make it so.
I mean, you don't have to, but
No, I would like to. Let me allow sharing. I don't know why it doesn't default to that, but it doesn't. Okay. We have a visitor, a little visitor. I like little visitors.
While she's setting up screen share, I found the answer. It's on 277, the last paragraph.
Okay.
It says when an argument to a method is an entire array or an individual array element of a reference type, the called method receives a copy of the reference. However, when the argument is an individual array element of a primitive type, it receives a copy of the element's value.
That makes sense, but it's not what it said before. It's a contradiction.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's that last paragraph on 277. So, yeah, but yeah, I agree. It does contradict 279.
Because it said, and I thought this is weird. It says everything's passed by reference always, or by value. Like, okay, that's weird. But then it doesn't. Okay, it's fine. I'm okay. I'm glad you found it. Thanks, Virgil. I'm glad we know that, and I'm glad it does it because it makes a lot more sense. But that does mean, so that's a good point. I'm glad that we found that when you send over, that is ugly. Why is that ugly? When you send over an array, you're making live changes to it, so you'd have to make a copy if you didn't want to do that. Yeah, I see your problem. I don't think.
Yeah, so I put in a bunch of numbers just to show what it looked like, but
yeah,
yeah, that one's not lining up.
Where's the line for where you're printing SP totals?
Yeah.
I mean, it almost looks like you just got an extra new line character or something that you should have. No. Oh, because you're using
This
print
part.
line instead of print.
Yeah, that's it. That's what it is. Line
This
65.
part.
Yeah, just do a print. now run
So
into.
that should do it?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's amazing what a room full of people can do on your coding. It's phenomenal.
So maybe if I do a tab.
Oh yeah, because I see the issue. Yeah, that should do it.
Yeah,
Cool.
that did it.
Yep.
Because then
Yeah,
it has
the print
why
line automatically, when you did that print line, it brought it down to a new line.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank
Yep.
you.
Yeah, thanks, Virgil. Again, if we could all have on exams and everything else, if you have a whole room of people looking at your code, go much better. Do you want to unshare yourself,
Oh, yes.
Tara, so we can? Yeah, it's okay, everybody. Are there other questions anyone has?
I feel like I really overthought that number 20 actually, because I start by basically I asked for a month and year so I know how many days there are in the month, because it says the salesperson passes between 0 and 5 slips per day.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, you've already overthought.
and then go through an entire month of entering data, which every time I test, well, I stuck in just a line after that to just do it twice every time so I could limit my testing. But
yeah, sometimes it takes forever. Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like I really overthought that problem. But I mean, I got it done eventually.
Yeah.
But so if you get to a point of testing mine, be ready to enter a ton. or just do a leap year February so you can only do 28.
There you go. Yeah, sometimes you're running a program, you're like, this cannot be what it was supposed to be. Because yeah, that's why often I'll force data in when I'm testing it, especially just to not have to do the input every time. But other questions about chapter 7?
So on that one, I went ahead and entered the data in an array, like, because it said all totals should be last month sales summarized, blah, blah, assume that they're all there. So I just assumed that they were all there and I just put it into an array as it was. Is that fine instead of an input?
It should be okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I mean, it's a lot. The input's a lot. So yeah. I'm most concerned with the guts of the array. That's the point of that program.
Okay.
That's why we're doing it.
Okay. And is there supposed to be like a total? I don't know if that makes sense.
No. That's
okay.
Like on Tara's, there wasn't that last column. Yeah.
Right. I wrote it to try to do that, but I was not getting the right numbers and it was way off. And I was like, you know what? I don't think it's supposed to be there. So.
Nope. Yeah, I wouldn't worry about that at all. No, that would be
okay.
Well, when I was trying to make it a lot harder at the beginning too, because I was thinking, oh, is it supposed to total up like the price of how much they sold, and they didn't give us prices, and I was like, am I gonna have to come up with a price and get it to do that? But then I realized it was way easier if I just did, it's an integer and it's the number sold rather than a double and it's the price. And then there was an extra calculation. Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Wait, say that again?
Simplifying makes sense. So I think she was saying instead of storing an integer on the number, she was thinking about storing a double as the price.
As the price. Yeah.
Which you could do. I mean, any realistic program would have all that. But the point of a homework problem is to avoid the drudgery and just leave the structures that we care about whenever possible.
Okay. I mean, yeah, because what the C says is the total dollar value of that product.
Right.
So basically, yeah. So that is what it's asking for.
Yeah, but you can just fudge that, just make up a same price for everything, I would think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it just said that it needed to tell the number of products sold and number that each, in total that each salesperson sold.
Right.
So yeah, and I thought of that as being like the cost that they sold the first time I was looking at it.
Makes sense.
And so that's why I almost gave up after that one because I didn't. But then the third one I didn't think was quite as bad once I figured out what it was talking about.
Yes. Again, these authors are not my favorite. I think they're wordy sometimes, weirdly. We just found an example of that. We're using the book because it's what the college uses as their regular job book. So I wanted to keep us on an even keel.
I hate when we're reading it and it's like, well, in chapter 16, we'll talk about this. Cool. Wait till chapter 16 to tell me about it.
I agree. Yeah, I'm not a fan of they're a father and son that have written about 1 billion textbooks on any kind of computer thing you can imagine. I assume it's not them. I assume they've got a whole industry that works on them. But yeah, I'm not the world's biggest fan of any of them. But we'll muddle through.
Well, good for them for being successful.
Exactly. Other questions? If not, I'm gonna do a little preview of chapter 8 to get us thinking about that.
Oh, I was going to ask, does it matter on certain things? Are certain like letters or better for a stand-in? I was trying to make it something that kind of made sense with what it was, and then
Or like variable
at
name?
one point I read about the like I was looking up some stuff about doing the like primitive type Boolean arrays, and it said like a lot of time in a primitive type Boolean array people will use like I and J, and so I was like, well, I'll just use I and J.
Yes.
But I was like, are there reasons that they use certain letters at certain times?
Well, yeah, again, and it's in thinking about this class, I think my next research project is storytelling and myth and all those cultural things that we do, cultural norms. Why do we make constants all caps? Because we've all agreed on that. All programmers have agreed to that, most programmers. So it just makes it easy. So you get the I and the J because that comes out of mathematics, right? If you're taking a linear algebra course, they use I and J, whatever reason for that. I tend to use row and call myself. I always use it. It's one less thing to think about. If you're doing other things, you don't want to name all your variables X, Y, Z, whatever, because it's not descriptive. So you would say first name, last name. You would say whatever. I like to do the camel cap where each new word gets a capital letter, because I'm not a big underscore guy. My favorite professor when I was in grad school would write programs with this long variable names. I'm like, no, that's too much. Okay, that's gone too far. But just calling it something real short is not either. So it really is up to you as a programmer. Don't have to rethink it every time. So like, again, if I do a counter, I'm going to use C every time. That way I know I don't have to. If you'd ask me, oh, you wrote this program 2 years ago, what's your counter variable? C. I know, I don't have to look it up. And that's it. We have these rituals that we do in essence, or these, they're almost like spells or incantations that we do. By doing them the same way, it's one less thing to worry about. You don't have to look it up to remember it. And if somebody asks you what this variable means, you'll know because it's always the same in your program. So that's what I would say to that. So yeah, there are some things we tend to do, but there's not really any rules to it. Even the idea of making a constant all caps is not enforced by the language. It's enforced by the programmers. If you do work as a programmer and you don't do it, then your boss will yell at you. So there's that. But just on your own, you do whatever you want. Java doesn't care. But although Java doesn't, if we're looking at the math.py, remember the pi is capitalized. Why? Because that's how we know. Yeah, what were you gonna say? I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, I was thinking like even some things as far as capitalizing go are different, in Python and Java, because like the Booleans are capitalized in Python and they're not. And that surprised me when I was just assuming it would be capitalized.
Yeah, and I always get confused because C++, I don't think they're capitalized either. I think only Python does it. But I'm always going back and forth. And you try it. If it doesn't work, then you try the other one. No one does it, at least no language I've ever dealt with does anything besides those two options. So if it doesn't know what you're talking about with a capital T, then put a small t, it'll be okay. But which reminds me of a funny student story. I don't hardly ever do multiple choice or true false, guys hate it. But I was teaching a course where they were preparing to take a standardized exam. So I put those on there because that's what they needed to be learning. That was a skill, learning how to take these tests. And there was a student who made his T's and F's in such a way you could not tell them. He could argue whichever one it was. And it was this big curly thing. And I'm like, dude, that's no wrong. But he'd say, oh, that's a T. Look, there's the. I'm like, no. But anyway, students, they'll do anything to get an advantage. But anyway, yeah, there are always differences in languages that are just weird and they're just annoying. Again, the thing that I have most against Java is that a lot of the syntactical changes are there just to not be C++. There's no valid reason. It's just dumb. Other things are there for a reason. I mean, the reason they don't allow direct memory manipulation, because that's a big error area in C++. In C++, you can get yourself in deep real quick by messing with the memory directly. So Java doesn't do that. That's a good decision. I understand that. You need both for different areas, but a lot of it's just, I mean, it's the same thing. Calling everything a class is a problem to me because a bunch of students already have asked me, they're confused about, you know, when do we do the public private? When do we do the other stuff? You know, and as I keep saying, there are classes that are classes. The employee class, the data class that we did. And there are classes that are applications. And that doesn't even make sense to say that, but everything in Java is class whatever. You know, so it's just confusing. And I don't think that helps students. Especially, I'm glad that you did Python first. Java as a first language, I think is a disaster. It's just too confusing. Once you have one language, it's a little easier to pick up Java. But it's just a weird thing. In fact, next chapter, we're going back into the object stuff. Okay, so we're into classes in that sense. So we're going back into classes. So the question is, do you need a tester program? If you're writing a class that's an application, you don't need a tester program. All your methods are static, you never instantiate it. If you're writing a class that's a class, or a class you're going to make objects from, then you have to have a test program, and you have to have a constructor and all that stuff. So the next chapter, just as a heads up when you're reading it, goes back to that idea we're going to create the cookie cutters that we're going to make cookies with, rather than just programs. Okay, so that was my heads up for that. Anything else you want to talk about?
I'm sorry, is next week still an exam?
Yeah, we'll probably, let me think about that. I think what I'll probably do next weekend is the exam. So we'll go ahead and cover chapter 8 at the beginning of the week. And then we'll have the test will be open on the weekend, probably maybe Friday through Sunday, unless people have an issue. It doesn't really matter to me when people take it, but I'll give you some days to do that. Okay.
Does that mean that there won't be as many exercises for chapter 8?
No, there will not be.
Okay.
Are you going to give us some detail the start of the week about what to expect?
I'll probably do either a review video or a review session that turns into a video, probably on Wednesday. So I'll just, and remind me if I don't send that out. We'll do it as a session if anybody can make it. We'll say Wednesday at 7. I haven't checked my calendar. It's summer. Probably don't have anything, but I may have to change it. But Wednesday at 7, we'll get on. I'll do a review. And if anybody wants to get on and ask questions, they can. I'll record that as well. Okay. So yeah, I think it does mean that the homework from chapter 8 will be much diminished and will be due after the exam. So there'll be more time on that, which I think makes sense. But I hate to take the whole week for the exam. Okay. And the exam is going to be programs. It's a programming class. The exams are programs. So that's what it will be. Other questions?
For number 27, we're just going to do a series of the 4 statements because it's true, false.
Let me see. 727?
I believe so. We only had 3, correct?
I think so. That sounds right.
Okay. For like integer I, something like that.
You're going to have 2 for loops you're going to be going through, I think, on that one. Let's see. So you got that.
And it'll have like, would we be using the length, the array.length?
Yeah, it's going to be
Yeah.
one. It's going to be a bunch of for loops. Is that, did you say for loops or ifs? It'll be a bunch of for loops because you're going to go through a for loop for the powers of 2, then powers of 3, and so on. And then you'll have that. It's not 2-dimensional. It's 1-dimensional. There's a 1-dimensional Boolean array that you'll go through and just mark false the ones that are multiples of whatever it is. So yeah, that'll be a series of interconnected for loops is my guess. I haven't done that one. I guess that's what it is. Okay. And again, you're going to use the mod pretty heavily there to see if it for to get the powers.
Like last week.
Maybe you don't. Yeah, I'm trying to think. You may not have to do that. No, you wouldn't have to. Just multiply them out. You could go forward. You don't have to go backwards. Yeah, you may not need it. Okay, so this is a different way of doing prime numbers than we did last time. So, what are the questions you have? Did I answer your question, Marty? It's been a long day. Due to my dental work on Monday, I'm not eating as much as normal, so I'm grumpy and foggy and brain. So, so that's always fun. Other questions? Okay, then let's go ahead and call it a night. If you have questions later, let's make sure that you let me know, and we'll try to find a time to figure stuff out. I've graded the first 2 or 3 homework assignments. I forget which one. One was just due. There were 2 that were due together. Those were just due this last Sunday. A lot of people don't have those in yet, so I'm giving people more time. I prefer to grade it one go through, not have to go back, because I'm more consistent if I do it all at once. So I won't grade that for a couple more days. So if you haven't turned those in, work on getting those in first before you worry about the new stuff. Okay, and then we'll go from there. Okay. Okay. So if there are no other questions, then we'll meet Wednesday. Will be the next in-person time. You can expect a video from me on Chapter 8 Sunday or Monday, and then the new assignments for the week. And the review will be on Wednesday, and the test, unless people have an issue, we'll be probably open from Friday to Sunday, I guess. And again, all programs, and it's probably going to take a couple hours, but I'll probably allow 3. That's my guess. So
How many programs?
3 sounds right off the top of my head, but I'll have to see. 3 or 4.
I like 3 better.
Really? Because then there's more at stake on those.
But partial credit,
I
right?
could do 1 program, then it's all or nothing.
Well, you don't know how long we spend on one program
I know.
to begin with.
I'm a couple of hours usually. I always
Yeah.
do something.
And
then-
if I can figure it out, maybe I'll have a multi-part program that will test multiple things without having to write a whole new program. I'll see what I can do. Program tests are hard. They're hard to give.
Yeah.
They're hard to take. They're hard to make up, because so much of it is, do you see the trick? What I do is, oh, they can do this in 15 minutes. Well, I can do it in 15 minutes. You maybe can't do it in 15 minutes and you don't see the trick. So yeah, I understand the problem. I will try to make it reasonable to test that you know what's going on without killing.
And you'll maybe could tell us like to look back at certain problems because they would be
Nope.
similar.
Not gonna do that.
No.
That's on your own. You need to index the book in your own mind. Or, I mean, there's
It's
no
really
limit.
hard to index this book, I think.
It
I
is.
don't know.
And it also, this book just goes in a lot of directions. It's another reason I don't like the book. I mean, adding that stuff about the multiple parameters to a method, why now? Why not later? You know, I think it's confusing. But
I wonder if you could take the chapters and do like a PowerPoint or something.
Yeah.
Expensive. No.
I don't like PowerPoints.
Well, that was like on that one that asked to do a primitive type Boolean array. I had to look it up because it didn't actually tell how to initialize a primitive type Boolean array. I had to look up how you initialize it.
Yeah, and I don't think that
It mentioned them, but it didn't tell how. Yeah.
same thing. I don't think that formatting with the numbers. I just looked at an example that was there. I'm like, oh, that must be that. I don't think they said it. So yeah, it's a problem. What I will do, Barbie, that I think will be helpful, and I've already done a little bit, but I'll do it more specifically during the review. There are things I'm not going to ask you. So right up from this chapter, the class array stuff, not going to be on there.
Thank goodness.
The multiple parameters, not going to be on there. The command line, not going to be on there. So I will do that as part of the review.
Okay.
And I mean, this class, there's a set skill level you need to be at to pass. For me to say to the state of Virginia that's paying for all this, that you're adequate at programming in Java. So it doesn't mean we have to do everything, doesn't mean we have to do everything the book does. So I'm trying to find a reasonable set of skills that you can show me that you have, and we'll all get out of here. I mean, that really is the goal. I want everyone to pass. I don't have it. All my class, I want everybody to pass. Not everybody will pass. That's how it is. But that's my obligations to make sure, and that's the challenge on a programming test. I want to make it so the students who have the requisite skills get the good grades, and the students who don't. That's a fair test to me, right? If you know how to do it, you pass. If you don't know how to do it, you don't pass. Fair is hard. Fair is my goal. Fair is hard. You teachers, you know. You're probably given a test where you look at the students, you're like, whoa, the student usually does well, and they bombed. I wonder why. Or this student doesn't do well, and they did well. What did I do wrong? You think to yourself, what was wrong with the test? That's always the case. So, but I will try to keep it as simple as possible so you don't have to spend, so you don't get the first program done and the test time's over. So I'm aware of the difficulty and of the wordiness, even of Java as opposed to Python. Java is much wordier than Python is.
So far, prefer Python over Java. It's harder to understand than, but it is what it is.
It is, and there's a point to all of that, right? The complexity comes at a reason. It's like when I was in college, I got a racing bicycle. I thought that'd be the coolest thing ever. The first time I tried to ride it, it threw me to the street because it was too powerful for me at the time. And Java is that way. Java is more powerful in many ways than Python. So, if you're writing gaming systems, you're writing, big time, you're writing Microsoft Word, you're probably not going to do that in Python. Most of us don't do those kinds of things. So that's why Python has gained in popularity. For stuff you're going to do for your classroom, stuff I do for my classroom, stuff I do for my own research, I'm going to pull out Python nearly every time because it does so much well. Okay, but Java is not just stupid. I do think Java is stupid sometimes, but not for that reason. The complexity is there for a reason. There's a reason there's a C++ that's not Python. There's a reason C++ is still the number 1 or 2 programming language, with Python and Java being the other 2 in the top 3, because they serve a different purpose. So, but yeah, it's much wordier here.
Is C++ harder than Java or similar?
Well, I don't know. I've done C++ for so much longer. They're similar in syntax, but a lot of the things you don't get in Java, like direct memory pointers and that kind of stuff, are very powerful, but they can mess you up real quick. So it's a little trickier in some ways, but I think the syntax is a little clearer. It's less. Again, a lot of what we don't like about Java is trying to protect the programmer from themselves. Since you're not coming from C++, you didn't see that was a problem. But there are problems that C++ has that Java doesn't. But Java puts a lot of words in the code sometimes to keep from those errors that C++ has. So, but yeah, I didn't pick the curriculum, had that discussion before. I don't know that I would have done Java as a second language. I probably have done C++, but they just pay me to teach the courses, not to decide the curriculum. So, but it should. I think some of you already are. It's starting to make a little more sense. I will never remember the code for the scanner. I have to look it up every time. I will, to the day I die, look it up every time, because my mind will not accept that's how you do that. When in Python, it's just so easy. So I just have to look it up. But if it were me going to take that test, the things like that to bother me, I would have a note card with my own cheat sheets of the code that I know I'm going to forget how to do. I would literally have, here's how you declare an array. Here's how you iterate through an array. Here's how you do a scanner. Here's how you do the printf, which I don't love the printf much either. You know, have it somewhere where you can just pull it out. And because if you're going through the book, yeah, then you're out of time. You know, that's, I mean, I think anybody given enough time in a manual could write a program in whatever language you want, but it's, can you do it quickly enough to get through the test? That becomes the issue. So, other questions?
What do you think the time limit is going to be on that?
Probably 3 hours,
Okay.
unless people are going to have an issue every 3 hours. I know you have lives. A lot of you have kids and dogs and all kinds of stuff. If 3 hours is going to be a problem, then we can talk about that. But my guess is I will, and I've designed a lot of programming tests, so I have some idea of how long things take. I will design it to take 2 hours, but give you 3. That's my goal. Okay, and 2 hours sounds like 3 programs to me, where they're pretty straightforward. I mean, something like the area of the circle method program, that shouldn't take a little. I mean, it really shouldn't. And if it does, then that's an indicator of your skill level. Something that's that straightforward, you know. My internet connection's unstable, so I may go away. If I do, then you'll know why. Anyway, my internet may be going out for it. They were doing some stuff on it. So I'm gonna go ahead and get off
I
here.
had trouble coming up with the algorithms. I had trouble coming up with the algorithms for those.
Well,
I don't know if I overthink stuff, but I mean, I wrote the formulas down on paper, but getting it into a program, I don't know. To
yeah,
me, it was
that's just practice.
abstract.
It is, and not everybody does that naturally. Some people, it takes longer to do that, and it's just a matter of experience and all that stuff. But always start doing it on paper. If you can do it on paper, then if you can't do it on paper, you can't write a program to do it. So do it on paper, get a game plan. That time is well spent. Even on the exam, when you're like, oh my gosh, I'm running out of time. Sketch it out. Sketch out what you're going to do. I think it's worth that expenditure of time. And you know, there are lots of resources out there on Java programs. Do more programs. If you're not at the speed you want to be at, find someplace. So there are places that will give you other assignments, other programs to do, and just keep working on those until you understand the mechanics of them. Programs fall into types.
Do you know some good sites?
Send me an email. I'll look some up.
Do you know some?
I look, but I do for C++. I teach that a lot, but I don't know about Java. I know that Tutorial Point has a bunch of stuff. I assume that they have Java stuff too. I would just type into Google Java sample programs, and there's probably a bunch. Yeah, I know that there's documentation on the Java site itself. So what's that? Java dot, it's on the .com. Not sure what it is. Java dot something. Anyway, but yeah, just do a search. There's plenty of stuff out there. Okay. Okay. Well, if you have other questions, send me an email or a text, and we'll figure stuff out. And there'll be more information about the test next week, and the review will be on Wednesday. Okay. Okay. You guys have a good weekend. See you later.
I
Bye.